The desperate plea. The night was cold. Wind blew across the empty land, shaking the tall grass around the small wooden farmhouse. Farmer Jalen sat near the fireplace, eating a simple meal of boiled roots and dried meat. It had been a quiet day. That's how he liked it. Quiet, peaceful, alone. But tonight was not going to stay quiet. A knock came at the door. Not a soft one. It was slow, weak, but full of desperation. Jalen stood up, confused. No one ever came this far out. His farm was miles away from the nearest village. He walked to the door and slowly opened it. There she stood, an alien woman. Tall, thin, covered, in a dirty cloth that once looked royal but was now torn and full of holes. Her silver skin was pale, lips cracked from the cold. Behind her, two small alien children huddled together. They looked hungry, cold, and scared. The woman's voice shook as she spoke. "Please, my children are starving. We've walked for days. We have nothing left. I will clean your house, work your fields, I even warm your bed. Just feed my kids." Jalen was silent. He had seen many things during the war. Death, betrayal, hunger. But something in her eyes wasn't just begging. It was a mother's pain. Real. Raw. He looked down at the kids. One was coughing and the other stared at him with big sunken eyes. They had not eaten in a long time. "I don't need a maid," Jalen finally said, "and I sleep alone." The woman lowered her head. "But," Jalen said again, softer now, "no one should be hungry. Come in." She looked up, surprised. "You mean it? Come in before the wind kills all three of you." She quickly picked up her youngest child and helped the older one inside. Jalen closed the door behind them. The room was warm. The fire crackled. The woman stayed close to the wall, unsure if this was real or a cruel trick. Jalen grabbed some old blankets and placed them near the fire. "Sit, warm up." The kids sat down immediately, shaking from cold and hunger. Jalen walked to the small kitchen, took out the rest of his boiled roots, and handed them to the woman. "Let them eat first," she said, her hands trembling as she gave the food to her children. Jalen watched in silence. The children ate fast, but not like wild animals. They were starving, but still had manners. The woman taught them well, even in pain. "What's your name?" Jalen asked. "Lyria." "Where are you from?" She didn't answer. He didn't push. Not yet. When the children finished eating, they curled up beside the fire and fell asleep. Within minutes, Jalen saw tears in Lyria's eyes as she gently tucked the blanket around them. "You didn't eat," Jalen said. "They needed it more." He handed her a piece of dry meat. "You need your strength too. If you want to work, you'll need to stay alive." She smiled a little, just for a second, and took the meat. "Thank you, human." "You can stay the night," he said. "But after that we talk about the rest. I will work. Anything. I used to know how to grow things. I can help in the field." He nodded. They sat quietly for a while. Only the fire made noise now. Jalen looked at her again. Her clothes were not normal poor clothing. There was something different about her. The way she sat, the way she spoke. She wasn't just a beggar. "You've never worked in a field," he said, more like a statement. "I have watched it done." He raised an eyebrow. "So what were you before?" Lyria didn't answer. She looked at her sleeping children, someone who failed. Silence again. Jalen stood up. "There's an old room at the back. It's dusty, but it has a bed. You and your kids can sleep there tonight." Her eyes widened. "You trust me?" "No, but I trust a mother's fear more than I trust a stranger's lies." She nodded slowly, picked up her children gently and followed him down the hall. When she closed the door behind her, Jalen stood still for a moment. Something was strange. Who was this woman really? And what trouble might follow her? He walked back, to the fire, sat down, and stared at the flames. Outside, the wind screamed louder, and deep in the dark trees beyond the field, something was watching. Morning came quietly. A soft, golden light slipped through the small windows of the farmhouse. Jalen was already outside, checking the soil and counting the sacks of grain he had left. But his mind wasn't on work. He kept thinking about the woman and her children who now slept in the back room. She was still a mystery. Lyria. That name felt like it carried weight, like it belonged to someone important. But now she was just a mother, lost, scared, and hiding something. When Jalen walked back into the house, he heard soft footsteps. Lyria was in the kitchen trying to clean with an old cloth. Her hands moved slowly, clearly not used to this kind of work. She saw him enter and froze. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I said I would work. I meant it." Her voice was stronger now, but still low. She looked tired yet determined. There was a quiet fire in her. The children were still asleep on the bed in the back room. Jalen handed her a cup of hot tea. "No poison," he said with a small smirk. She actually smiled a little, her fingers warming on the cup. "I've lived too long on fear. This is the first hot drink I've had in weeks." Jalen sat down. "You don't look like a worker." Lyria looked away. "I wasn't. You were someone important once." Her hands tightened around the cup. "Does that matter now?" "No," Jalen said simply. "Just helps me understand who's sleeping under my roof." She didn't speak for a while. Then she said quietly, "I was bonded to someone powerful, but when I gave birth to daughters instead of sons, his family said I was cursed. He let them throw me out." Jalen didn't flinch. He had seen things like that before. Old alien customs. Harsh. Unforgiving. "He gave you nothing?" "Nothing, but a cold goodbye." A silence hung between them again. Jalen stood up and pointed to a basket of potatoes. "If you really want to help, peel those carefully." She walked to the table without complaint and sat down. Her hands moved clumsily, but with effort. Hours passed. The children woke, confused at first, but soon smiled when they saw warm food. "Ready?" Jalen watched as Lyria fed them with love, her own plate untouched until they were full. Later, he took her outside to show her the crops. The dry wind blew through the fields, and the soil cracked under their feet. "I only have 2 working fields now," he explained. "It's not enough for trade, but it keeps me alive." She studied the soil with narrowed eyes. "You're planting wrong." He turned to her, a bit surprised. "You said you never worked a field." "I said I watched, carefully." She knelt and pulled a piece of dead root from the dirt. "These grow better with layered ash. The soil is dry. You need moisture traps." Jalen raised an eyebrow. "Moisture traps?" Lyria stood up. "I can show you. I just need time and tools." He looked at her differently now. Maybe she wasn't just a mouth to feed. Maybe she was actually useful. As the sun dropped lower in the sky, a neighbor came by, an old trader named Marlowe. He stopped when he saw Lyria and her children in the yard. "You're keeping her here?" Marlowe asked with a frown. Jalen folded his arms. "She's just helping out. She's an outcast. I've seen her kind. They bring trouble. Keep your door locked." "I'll decide who stays on my land," Jalen said firmly. Marlowe shook his head and left without another word. Lyria had heard everything. That night, she sat near the fire, brushing her daughter's hair with a comb Jalen had found in a drawer. Her face was quiet, but her eyes carried shame. "You hurt him?" Jalen asked. "I always hear words meant to hurt. I don't care what they call you. You work. You help. That's more than most." She looked up at him. "Why are you really helping me?" He leaned back. "Maybe because I've had no one to talk to in years. Or maybe because I know what it feels like to lose everything." She stared at him for a moment, then said softly, "Thank you. Not just for the food, but for not looking at me like I'm broken." Jalen didn't reply. He simply nodded and stood to put more wood in the fire, But as the flames grew, a thought burned in his mind. Someone had cast her out. That same someone might want her back, or want her dead. And that meant trouble could still be coming. The sky turned gray. Heavy clouds gathered above the wide farmlands. Jalen stood on the porch looking up at them. A storm was coming, and not just from the sky. Something had been troubling his mind all day. The way Lyria had spoken. The fear in her eyes. The way the neighbor, Marlowe, had reacted. Trouble was near, he could feel it. Inside the house, Lyria was cleaning the floor with a wet cloth. Her daughters were quietly drawing in the corner with bits of charcoal and paper Jalen had found in the barn. For a moment it felt like a real home, almost peaceful. But peace never lasted long in places like this. A loud boom echoed from the sky. Rain began to pour, hard and fast. The wind howled, pushing against the windows. Jalen ran to close the barn doors, then came back soaked. "That storm came fast," he said, wiping his face. Lyria looked up, her silver hair falling loose, over her shoulders. "The winds here are strange, they shift like moods." He paused and stared at her. "You know this place better than you say." She didn't reply. Suddenly, a sharp knock hit the door. 3 fast bangs. Jalen froze. Another knock, then silence. He slowly stepped toward the door, picked up the old hunting rifle that leaned against the wall and peeked through the side window. Nothing. He opened the door slightly. Wind pushed it open more, but no one was there. Just wet footprints in the mud. He followed the prints with his eyes. They came from the woods and stopped near the porch, but there were no tracks leaving. "Someone was watching," Jalen said, shutting the door tightly. He locked it. Lyria had gone pale. "Do you know who it was?" he asked. She didn't speak, but her hands trembled. Jalen stared at her. "If you brought danger to my land, you need to tell me now." Lyria looked at her children, then nodded slowly. "They don't just throw women out, they mark them." "Mark them?" She pulled back the cloth from her neck and showed him a strange dark symbol burned into her skin. "It means forsaken. Anyone who helps me becomes a target." Jalen stared at it, the shape unfamiliar but clearly made with cruel fire. "So someone's hunting you?" "Yes," she whispered. "My ex-bondmate sent scouts to make sure I never rise again." "Is he powerful?" "He controls half a city, and his family runs trade routes across 3 moons. Jalen leaned back. "Great, just what I needed, a royal war on my farm." "I didn't come here to bring war," Lyria said quickly. "I just wanted my daughters to live." He watched her for a moment. "Then we'll fight if we must," he said finally. "But I need to know everything." Lyria sat down slowly and began to speak. She told him about her past, not in detail but enough to understand. She was once part of a noble house, married off for alliance, and had tried to live quietly. But when she gave birth to 2 girls, her worth was questioned. Then one night her husband cast her out, blaming her for misfortune. He even tried to take the children, but she escaped, running through back roads and hiding in trader wagons until she reached this dying farming region. "I thought no one would find me here," she said. Jalen sighed. "You were wrong." The storm grew louder. Thunder rolled again, shaking the windows. Suddenly, the youngest child began coughing, hard. Lyria rushed to her. "Nara, breathe, baby, breathe." The girl's chest heaved. Her tiny body was burning up. "She's sick," Jalen said. "I have some old medicine." He ran to the shelf and found a dusty bottle. "This might help with fever." Lyria looked uncertain. "Is it safe for her kind?" "I don't know," Jalen said honestly. "But we have no other choice." She took the medicine and gave a few drops carefully to her daughter. The coughing slowed. The little girl curled up in her mother's arms, sweat dripping from her face. "Thank you," Lyria whispered. "You didn't have to do any of this." Jalen looked out the window again. Rain poured, but deep in the distance, far beyond the trees, he saw something strange. Red light flashing for just a second. Not lightning. A signal. They're close, he said, and we don't have much time. He turned to her. If they come, I want you and the kids to hide under the cellar. There's a trapdoor behind the old cabinet. And you? I'll do what humans do best, Jalen said. Stand between monsters and the ones who can't fight. The rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy. Jalen didn't sleep that night. He sat near the door with his old rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the shadows outside the window. The fire had burned low and the room was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind had stopped moving. Inside the cellar, behind the cabinet, Lyria and her 2 daughters were hiding. He had told them to stay silent no matter what happened. The trapdoor was covered with cloth and crates to keep it hidden. But Jalen's hands were not still. They kept moving, checking the rifle, loading each bullet carefully, his fingers shaking just a little. Not from fear, from focus. Then he saw it. A flicker. Something moved between the trees. He stood slowly and walked to the window. A figure stepped out from the woods. It wasn't a villager. Tall, lean, wearing dark armor that shimmered like oil. Not human. Jalen moved fast. He opened the door, stepped out onto the porch and pointed the rifle. Stop right there. The figure raised both hands slowly. I am not here to fight, the stranger said in a voice cold and smooth. I only ask questions. Strange way to ask, sneaking around in the dark. I am a scout, he replied. From the Valari house. Jalen's grip tightened. That was Lyria's former Bond family. What do you want? I was sent to confirm if the traitor still lives. There's no one like that here, Jalen lied. Only me and my crops. The scout smiled faintly. Your crops have a scent of alien sweat. Jalen stepped forward. And your face has a scent of broken nose if you don't leave my land, the pay. Smile faded. She must return, the scout said flatly. By law, she belongs to us. She belongs to no one. Then you protect a criminal. Jalen aimed the rifle. Go tell your masters this land is mine. If they want her, they'll have to come through me. There was a long silence. Then the scout turned slowly. So be it. You've made your choice. He vanished into the trees, swallowed by the dark. Jalen stood still for several minutes before finally lowering the rifle. His heart was pounding, but his face stayed calm. He went back inside and opened the cellar. Lyria was holding her daughters close. Was it them? He nodded. A scout. One of yours. Sent to sniff out your scent. She looked down. They won't stop now. No, they won't. He helped them out of the cellar. You need to learn how to shoot. Lyria blinked. What? You said you'd work. Well, now your work is to survive. The next day was spent preparing. Jalen showed Lyria how to hold the rifle, how to aim, how to check the safety. Her hands were unsure at first, but she learned quickly. The girls helped too, small hands stacking, supplies carrying water and feeding the animals. Jalen watched them. They weren't just guests anymore. They were becoming part of the farm. Later that evening, while reinforcing the fence, Lyria walked up behind him. You should have let him take me, she said quietly. Jalen didn't turn. If I did, your daughters would have starved, or worse. Used to running, she said. But I'm tired, I just wanted a place to rest. I didn't think anyone would actually protect me. He finally looked at her. Why me? I don't know, she whispered. But the moment you opened that door, I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. They stood in silence. Then came a sound, loud and sudden. A blast. Something exploded near the edge of the field. Jalen grabbed the rifle and ran. Smoke rose from the corn line. He reached the spot and saw it. One of the traps he said had triggered. A metallic device now lay in pieces, and next to it, a footprint, bigger than human, deep in the mud. Lyria ran up behind him. They've already started, he turned to her. Then we don't wait anymore, we prepare for a siege. But what if they bring more? What if they bring soldiers? Then we make them bleed first. For the next few hours they work together, building barriers, hiding food, preparing safe spots for the girls. The quiet farm turned into a fortress, bit by bit. That night, when the stars came out, Jalen sat on the porch again. Lyria joined him. The sky was peaceful now, but they both knew peace was only the calm before the storm. "I wasn't looking for a war," she said softly. "Sometimes war finds you," he replied. "But this time, you're not alone." Lyria looked at him. "You should know. If they capture me, they won't kill me right away. They'll use me as an example." Jalen smiled, but his eyes were sharp. "Then we won't let them capture you." He stood up, rifle in hand. Behind them, two little girls peeked out from the door, and, in that moment, Jalen knew he wasn't just defending his land anymore, he was protecting a family. The days passed quickly, but the fear didn't. Jalen had turned his quiet farm into a shield of traps, alarms, and hidden escape paths. The crops were no longer just crops. They were cover. The barn was no longer for animals. It was now storage, for supplies, weapons, and anything that could be turned into protection. Lyria worked beside him every day. She no longer wore the tattered cloth she came in. Jalen had given her an old shirt and trousers, and though they didn't fit perfectly, she moved freely in them, confident, no longer trying to hide. Her children played in the fields during the day, laughing again, planting flowers where vegetables once grew. Their small laughter made the farm feel alive. But at night, the fear always returned. The stars above were cold, and the shadows stretched longer than usual. Jalen couldn't sleep. Much. Not anymore. One night, after checking the fence again, he came back into the house and found Lyria sitting alone near the fire. The room was dim, lit only by soft orange light. Her eyes were staring into the flames, unmoving. "You should sleep," Jalen said, placing his rifle by the door. "I try, but every time I close my eyes, I hear them. I hear their boots, their voices, the sound of metal doors locking behind me." Jalen sat across from her, silent. Lyria looked at him slowly. "Do you ever dream, Jalen?" He thought about it. "Used to? About what?" "Peace. A house full of laughter. Maybe a son of my own. A woman who'd sit across from me just like this." Her silver eyes blinked. "And now? Now I just hope to make it through one more night without a fight." She smiled sadly. "Then we have the same wish." A long pause. Then she whispered, "You know, you saved me." "You saved yourself," he replied. "No," she said firmly. "I was ready to give up. The day I knocked on your door, that was my last try. If you hadn't opened it, I would have laid down with my children in the forest and waited." Jalen's face tightened. His hands curled into fists. "I don't like to hear that," he said. "It's the truth." Silence filled the room again. Only the fire spoke. Then Lyria stood up and walked slowly toward him. She knelt beside his chair and looked up into his eyes. "I said I'd work your fields. I did. I said I'd warm your bed." She paused. "But I want to do that now. Not because I have to, but because you made me feel human again." He looked into her face. She wasn't just beautiful now. She was strong, alive, real. But Jalen wasn't a man who rushed feelings. He gently placed a hand on hers. "We're still in danger," he said softly. "I don't want to hold you while waiting for blood to fall. When I do, I want the world to be quiet again." Lyria smiled and leaned her head on his leg. "Then promise me one thing." "What?" "That if they come, if I fall, you'll protect them. My girls." Jalen stared at the fire for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I swear. I'll protect them like they were mine." She closed her eyes. "Then that's all I ever needed to hear." Suddenly, a loud creak came from outside. Jalen stood quickly. He grabbed the rifle again and signaled her to move back. Lyria grabbed a blade from the table and took a defensive position by the wall, her fear now replaced by focus. A shadow passed by the window, but no knock came. Jalen stepped onto the porch. Nothing. He waited, then saw it, etched in the dirt with a boot heel, a symbol, not the Valari mark, but one used by bounty hunters. They were no longer just looking. They had put a price on her. He returned inside. They know you're here, he said. And now the whole sector will know too. A bounty means anyone with a gun will come sniffing. Lyria clenched her jaw. Then it's time. Time for what? To stop hiding. She stepped forward, eyes burning with calm fire. You've done enough for me. Now let me show you who I used to be. Jalen looked at her confused, but in that moment she walked to the back of the room, reached into the bottom of her old bundle of clothes, and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it, a metal insignia, ancient noble. This was mine before they threw me out. I never wore it again. But now, if I die with it on. She clipped it to her shirt. Jalen stood still, silent. For the first time, he saw not just a woman, not just a mother, but a warrior. And he knew, if the storm came again, she would not kneel. The wind had changed. It carried a sharp smell now, smoke, metal, and something darker. Jalen smelled it before he saw anything. He stepped out early in the morning, expecting to check the water barrels, but froze when he saw black smoke rising from the far side of his land. The east field was burning. He dropped his tools and ran. The flames were already tall, crackling like angry voices. The dry corn and grass caught fire too easily. Someone had poured fuel. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. Behind the fire, distant figures disappeared into the trees. Jalen raised his rifle, but it was too far, too late. Lyria came running behind him, her daughters in tow. They started it, she said, voice shaking with both fear and fury. They're testing us. Jalen turned to her. Take the girls to the cellar. Don't come out unless I call. For you. But now, Lyria, this is no longer survival. This is war. She nodded and pulled the children away, hiding them deep under the floor again. Jalen ran to the water tanks. He pulled the old hose system, spraying the edge of the flames to stop the fire from reaching the barn. His arms burned, sweat soaked. His clothes, but he didn't stop. By nightfall, the fire had died, but the damage was done. Half the east crop was gone. Lyria returned, covered in ash. She helped him without a word, both of them exhausted. When it was finally over, they collapsed on the porch steps. They're testing how far you'll go, she said. Next time, it'll be the house. They're cowards, Jalen replied, burning crops instead of facing me directly. Lyria looked up at the stars. That's how they work. Fear first. Then pain. Jalen stood again. Then we fight fire with fire. That night, he built noise traps, fire lines, and spike pits. He gave Lyria a second rifle, lighter and easier to carry. He even let the older daughter carry a slingshot. They trained during the day and stayed up at night. Every time the wind moved strangely, they were ready. Then, on the third night, the true attack came. It started with a scream. One of the goats cried out, then silence. Jalen grabbed his weapon. They're here. 3 shadows came from the darkness. Masked men in body armor armed with shock weapons. Not full soldiers. Mercenaries. The bounty hunters. They split up fast. One came for the barn, the other 2 flanked the house. Jalen moved fast. He fired once, catching one of them in the leg. The man fell with a grunt, writhing in pain. Another hunter rushed toward the door. Before Jalen could fire again, bang! A loud shot rang from inside. The door burst open. Lyria stood there, holding the rifle steady, smoke rising from the barrel. The second mercenary collapsed, groaning. Jalen stared. You shot him? He said. I aimed for the shoulder, she replied, face cold. But he moved. That's not my fault. Suddenly, the third man appeared from the side. He grabbed Lyria by the arm, dragging her off the porch. She kicked and screamed, trying to pull free. Jalen ran, dropping his gun and tackling the man to the ground. They fought, rolling in the dirt. Fists slammed. Knives flashed. Blood spilled. Jalen got on top and punched hard, again and again until the man stopped moving. He rolled off, panting. Lyria ran to him. "You're hurt." "Not deeply," he said, wiping blood from his lip. "But I'll feel it tomorrow." They looked around. 3 mercenaries. All down, but not dead. Lyria looked at them. "More will come." "Yes," Jalen nodded. "But they won't come expecting fighters next time. They'll come like soldiers." She looked at the bodies. "Then let's send a message back." They tied the mercenaries and left them near the road with a sign written in rough alien script. "This land is protected. Return and face worse." The next morning was silent. Too silent. No wind. No smoke. No noise from the forest. Just quiet. Lyria and Jalen stood outside, bruised, bloodied, but alive. The children came out of hiding and ran into their mother's arms. Jalen leaned on his rifle and watched the horizon. He had never wanted violence, but now he understood something clearly. He wasn't just defending crops. He wasn't just protecting strangers. He was standing for something larger, a promise, not a spoken one, but one made in action, in blood, in courage. Lyria looked at him. "You didn't have to fight." He looked back at her. "I didn't have to open the door either." She stepped close. Her hand touched his cheek gently. "You've already given us more than we ever dreamed," she whispered. "But I think I want to give something back." He raised an eyebrow. "What?" Lyria smiled softly. "A home, not just a hiding place, but something real. For you. And for them." For the first time in a long while, Jalen allowed himself to believe that might be possible, but only if they survived what came next. The morning after the battle felt strange, not because of fear, but because for the first time there was peace. Real peace. The kind that made birds sing again, and let the wind blow soft without warning of danger. Jalen walked the fields, rifle slung over his shoulder. He passed the burned patch where crops once grew and nodded quietly. That field was lost, but not everything had been destroyed. The barn still stood. The house still stood. And most importantly, the people inside it still lived. He looked back toward the porch. There, Lyria stood holding a small basket with fresh-picked roots. Her silver hair was tied back, her eyes clear, not like the scared woman who had knocked on his door weeks ago. Now she stood proud, steady, herself again. The children played nearby, chasing a small animal through the grass and giggling, with freedom in their voices. It sounded like home. Jalen walked back toward them. He placed his rifle beside the wall and stretched his arms. "You look tired," Lyria said, handing him the basket. He smiled. "That's because I am. But a good kind of tired." She nodded and sat beside him on the porch step. "They won't. Come again," Jalen said. "Not after what we did. Not after the message we left." Lyria looked up at the blue sky. "Still, I wonder. What if someone richer comes? More dangerous? Then they'll find a man ready, and a woman who shoots, better than most soldiers." She laughed softly. "You've changed me, Jalen." "No," he replied. "You just remembered who you were." A pause. Then Lyria reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal charm. It was the Valari royal symbol, bent and scratched. "I've held onto this too long," she said. "It reminded me of pain, of betrayal. But now..." She took Jalen's hand, gently placed the charm in it, and closed his fingers around it. "Now it means something new." He looked at her, confused. "It means I'm not going back," she said. "Not to their city, not to their rules. My life is here now. With you. With them." Jalen's eyes softened. "Are you sure?" Lyria smiled. "I've never been more sure of anything." Just then, the older daughter ran up to them, holding a small flower. "Mama, look what I found." Lyria took the flower and placed it gently behind her daughter's ear. "You're so beautiful," she whispered, hugging her close. The girl looked at Jalen. "Uncle Jalen, can we stay forever?" He blinked, then smiled slowly. "As long as you want. Forever sounds good to me." Later that day, Jalen pulled out an old wood sign and began carving it with a knife. Lyria leaned over his shoulder, watching him work. "What are you making?" He didn't answer at first, just kept carving. When it was done, he held it up. The sign read, "New Roots Farm, Home for the Lost." She touched the letters and smiled. "That's us, isn't it?" "That's all of us." They hung the sign near the front gate. That night, they ate together, as a family. No hiding, no fear. Lyria told a story from her childhood, her real childhood long before her exile. The girls listened with wide eyes. Jalen listened too, not just to the words but to the music in her voice. After the children fell asleep, Lyria sat close beside him. The firelight danced across her face. "Do you still dream?" she asked him softly. He nodded. "Every night, now." "Of what?" He looked at her. "Of this," he said. "Of us. Of a life where I don't have to guard the door, where the only thing I worry about is planting seeds on time." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We can have that. Life now." He placed his hand over hers. "No more bargains," he said. "You don't owe me anything. But if you stay, I'll stay as my equal. Not as a guest, not as someone I rescued." Lyria looked up at him. "Then ask me." He turned to her fully. "Stay here, Lyria. Not as a worker, not as a stranger. Stay here. As family. Mine." She didn't speak. She simply leaned forward and kissed him, gently but full of meaning, the kind of kiss that made the past disappear. That night, she lay beside him. For the first time, not out of fear or obligation, but by choice. By love. Weeks passed. Jalen expanded the farm. With Lyria's help, the crops grew faster, richer. The village, once curious, began to respect the quiet couple on the edge of the forest. Even Marlowe, the old trader, returned with an apology and 3 sacks of seed. "They say your land has changed," he said. "It has," Jalen replied, "because of who's on it now." And when strangers passed through asking about the tall, silver-skinned woman and her daughters, they found nothing but silence, because that woman no longer existed. Only Lyria remained, farmer's partner, mother, warrior of her own new life. And beside her was a man who once lived alone, but now guarded something far more precious than fields. He guarded a future, a family worth fighting for, forever.